Good morning, viewer. Welcome to our first TV. Yes. Here's the breaking news from Germany. A German court has sentenced a Syrian colonel to life in prison for crimes against humanity in a landmark case. Anwar Aslan, 58, was linked to the torture of over 4,000 people in Syria's civil war in a jail known as Hell on Earth. The trial in Koblenz is the world's first criminal case brought over state-led torture in Syria. It is hard to imagine what the men and women incarcerated in Syria's notorious Al-Khatib prison had to endure. At the heart of it, Ruslan was accused of being a high-ranking security service officer under President Bashar al-Assad, as mass anti-government protests were violently crushed in 2011. Many protesters and others suspected of opposing the regime were rounded up and detained in the Al-Khatib facility in Damascus, where prosecutors say Mr. Ruslan directed operations. He was charged with 58 murders as well as rape and sexual assault and the torture of at least 4,000 people held there between 2011 and 2012. The ruling is significant, especially for those who survived Al-Khatib and gave evidence during the trial. A criminal court has now formally acknowledged that crimes against humanity were perpetrated by the Assad regime against its own citizens. Ruslan was arrested in Germany in 2019, having successfully sought asylum there. He denied all the charges against him, saying he had nothing to do with the mistreatment of prisoners and that he actually tried to help some detained. His trial was extraordinary for several reasons. It was unprecedented in talking on Syria's state-led torture, and it was prompted by the arrival in Germany of hundreds of thousands of Syrians who had fled their own country. Many of the almost 8 lakh Syrians who now live in Germany brought with them terrible stories of what happened to those who opposed the Assad regime. And German human rights lawyers took up their cause using the principle of universal jurisdiction to bring the case to court. This allows serious crimes committed in one country to be tried elsewhere. Wolfgang Clark, head of the European Center of Constitutional and Human Rights, which has led the case, says it is hard to talk about justice given that hundreds of thousands of people have been tortured and tens of thousands have died as a result. But perhaps most importantly, the trial gave a voice to those whom the Assad regime tried to silence. 50 survivors have given evidence to the court in Koblenz. 24 are co-plaintiffs in the case. Their stories are horrifying. The court heard how detainees were beaten and doused in cold water. Others were raped or hung from the ceiling for hours on end. Torturers tore out their fingernails and administered electric shocks. One survivor told me that he could hear the screams of people being tortured all day, every day. Another that his attackers had used special tools and that they had appeared to enjoy what they were doing. Ruslan now faces life in prison, and prosecutors sought to bar any possibility of probation after 15 years. Prosecutors were encouraged by the conviction last year of another Syrian official as part of the same trial. Ayat al-Gharib, who helped to arrest protesters who were later tortured and killed, was jailed for 4.5 years for complicity in crimes against humanity. Lawyers are preparing cases against a number of other suspects, but ultimately they had like to bring to justice those right at the top of the chain of command. Bashar al-Assad has indicated that he is following the trial, but he and his government have repeatedly denied accusation of torturing or forcibly disappearing hundreds of thousands of his own citizens. This trial serves another purpose too, to build a body of evidence for use in future proceedings. In addition to witness testimonies, prosecutors in Kovlench have relied on the Kesser files, gruesome photographs smuggled out of Syria by a regime which saw the dead bodies of thousands of people who are believed to have died in detention facilities, many of whom appear to have been tortured. And it is a reminder of the ongoing plight of many Syrians. Wasim Makar, who was first detained in 2011 and now lives in Germany, gave evidence to the trial and was due to return to the court for verdict. There are many stories that have not been heard, he says, either because they are still detained now. While we are talking, they are suffering torture and horrible situation in the detention centers, or because they were murdered. And then here, there were those who died as they tried to reach Europe, drying at sea or freezing on Europe's border. BN Das report for Sector USA.